maybe, or what do we want to do? The chat. Oh, yeah, I'm blind. Or what do we want to do? All right, here we go. So this one is kind of the repository that you can use as reference. It's not gonna be the exact same of what we built, but it's very similar. Um, so what we're gonna build is actually something like this. It's a very minimalistic UI. It just has a connect button, and then once you log in, it's going to have a few extra features to show. So here is really just to showcase how Particle Connect makes it easy to onboard users, because I can click on the login button and we have a whole range of ways to log in available. Passkey, which is a newest feature, is not in this one yet because I will add it coding it live, but we'll have it at the end. But as you can see, you can use email, phone number, all sorts of social logins, and all the wallets as well, all the Web3 native onboarding system. So the cool thing of this new connected upgrade is that basically kind of unifies the Web 2 and Web 3 login systems. You can see you can use the Web 2 systems, the Web 3 systems all at once, and it includes also account abstraction features. So the previous version, you will have to use particle auth for the logins, and then you will have to add maybe Web 3 connections separately. You will have to add account abstraction separately from all different SDKs. Now, this new package puts everything together. For the account abstraction side, you can still use the account abstraction SDK if you want separately, but it is also coming natively through it. So I'm gonna use GitHub in this case for this example. Gonna log in, and the status should change. So it kind of gives some updates. And this is the very simple UI that we have presented with. As we can see in Particle Connect, the button, the login button actually changes to this nice widget that you can use for chain selection. You can use it for interacting with your wallet. And then basically the main things that I wanted to show in this workshop is a little bit how to fetch information from the user, how to interact with chains, and how to interact with the SDK itself. So as you can see here, we are basically fetching my GitHub information, the username and the avatar that I have set up there, the address that is associated with my new account here, which chain we are on, and the balance on this account. For example, right now I have nothing. This is Ethereum mainnet. But if I switch to, I don't have the testnet selected here. We'll do that later, but it will change the balance. So this is just one of the ways that you can just connect, for example, to create your own interface if you want to. And then we have various ways to open and interact with the wallet. We can see, for example, we have the modal directly from the widget. We have the little particle button down here at the bottom that opens the wallet. And we are also going to see how we can move this around later on. And then we can also open the modal from a custom button here. And it's going to open the same as the widget. Then we have other options. We have, for example, on ramp directly built in if you want to. I'll show you how to implement that. And then we have ways to interact with the chain. In this case, the example is really just sending a simple gasless transaction. You just input the address and then you can send it. We have two buttons here because we're going to show how to send it with the particle provider directly. So I mentioned that Particle Connect comes with pre-built-in account abstraction features, so we can do it directly from Particle Networks SDK without having to install other stuff. But it still supports the usual EIP 1193 providers. In this case, we're going to use Ethers. So we're going to show how to do that. And then do you want to show kind of a real example right now, since I have the app here, the 5 rounds open, or you want to show it later, Ethan? And then here's one of the applications. This is one of the first production apps that introduced the new version of ConnectKit. There are many more that are going to introduce in the next week or so, but for now, this is the only one that I was able to find. So as you can see, the UI is very simple, and it has the usual connect wallet button up at the top, like most dApps do. And clicking it, you'll see it opens the modal. In this case, these guys have the Web3 versions on top, and then the usual social logins. As you can see, it's very customizable. In this case, for example, for social login, they're only allowing these four. So this is also an extra customization that you can have. I believe I logged in with Google the last time. So if I log in with this one, I select my account. And as you can see, they have this also widget here at the top that opens the model. And then in this case, enter in the app, they have you send a message as a kind of a confirmation, also through Particle here, all managed behind the scenes. Now you can confirm the message and you're within the application. So let me stop here. So as you can see, basically one click to log in and you have your full application here set up. So it's pretty nice here. I'll log out for now. And keep in mind that this Connect wallet here is fully customizable, as we saw in the demo app. We could basically, if we want, for example, only to allow a Google login, we could hard code directly that instead of going through this whole model. I'll show you how to do it in the demo as well. So I think beyond this, we are ready to show how to implement in the code, unless you wanted to cover anything else. Yeah, so about that, when I tried it earlier, it took about 7 minutes to set it up. So I'll skip that, but I'll go through the instructions on how to use it. So in the repository, you'll see the instructions for the CLI. So our engineering guys, they made a pretty cool tool, create particle network connect kit. So essentially, this is just a CLI tool that allows you to spin up a particle connect project very fast. In my case, it was about 7 minutes. I guess my connection was a little bit slow because it was mostly 7 minutes really just downloading the packages and everything. But once so you run the command and then it's going to install a few packages and then it's going to ask some questions. So this CLI tool essentially allows you to create a project. It allows you to either have a Next application or React. In this example, I used the Next application. You can select if you want to have EVM or Solana, and you also can select if you want to disable or include ERC4337, so account abstraction. In this case, I included it directly, and I used the Biconomy smart account. Particle supports various options for smart account, from Biconomy, Coinbase, a simple instance. I picked Biconomy because it's one of the two that works with passkey. So I mentioned passkey support. We released it just last week, and is a pretty cool feature. Allows you to leverage all the secure configuration, secure authentication systems from passkey on both Android and Apple, kind of out of the box. But right now it's only supported from Biconomy and Coinbase smart accounts. So that's why I picked the Biconomy one in this case. And then you can select if you want to have the embedded wallet or not. So basically, following this, you have a particle project spun up in a second. I'll move here to the IDE. So here is the project, essentially how the project looks when it's built up from the CLI. The only thing that is going to be missing is the environment .env file. It comes with this .env.sample file. So you can go in the dashboard and retrieve the project ID, client key, and app ID. And then you can also include your Wallet Connect project ID in case you want to use it. I believe the CLI project comes with Wallet Connect included in the configuration, so you can add it here. But once you add those, then you can move into the configuration. So if you're familiar with how it worked on Particle Auth, if you remember, we will have the auth core context provider object that basically configures particle auth, and you use it to wrap around your application. In this new version of Particle Connector works essentially the same way, but we do it in a little bit different way. So in this boilerplate in the source directory, you have this connectkit.tsx file, and we essentially recommend to place the configuration within this file just to keep things cleaner, because as you can see, this file exports this particle connect kit object that then we use to wrap around the application. So let's go over this file for a couple of seconds. When you start the application, and oh, by the way, I left this file already built like this because this is how comes from the application. So you go through the CLI process, and this is what you're already gonna have set up. So notable things that I wanted to go over here is how we import, in particular ConnectKit, we import a chain object from ConnectKit/chain. So those chains are basically the chains supported from Particle Connect. And in this case, we kind of switched a little bit of the background systems. Particle Connect is based on VM. So those chains are also VM objects, and there is an example how to import them and how to configure them down here. Entry position and wallet from the wallet package. Those are useful because it allows you to customize the wallet directly, how it looks in the, or rather where it looks in where it shows up in the screen. And then we import also the account abstraction package. As you can see, is not a separate package. It comes built in into the ConnectKit SDK. And if we check the packages JSON file, we only have the ConnectKit package included. So this one includes everything that you need essentially. Actually, VM is also an extra one that is installed with the package because it's needed. And then I installed ethers.js extra. In this case, we're using a version 6 here. So the main things that we want to see here is in case you want to configure different chains, those are the chains that come with the CLI application here. But if we want to add a new one, for example, I'm going to add Sepolia, and then I really just add it from the list. If you want to see what chains are available, we can go and check the package here. But we can add Sepolia, and then once we import it, I'm going to push it into this array. So those are going to show up in the UI of the wallet. So this is how you change or how you add or remove chains, for example. The configuration comes from this create config object, where we import the environment variables that we saw earlier. We have some appearance settings that we can go over, metadata, and account abstraction down here, wallet settings up here. So for example, from here, we use entry position, updated, imported from the wallet package. Entry position allows us to customize where that button with the particle icon to open the model shows up. So in this case, it's set up for the bottom right, but if I put it on the bottom left, or let's do top left, it's going to show up in the top left in a different location. And the account abstraction configuration. Now this account abstraction configuration down here is more aesthetic than anything else, but it needs to match the account abstraction provider that you want to use, because otherwise it's gonna look different in the UI. If I remove this, the application is still gonna work as normal. Even the transactions are still going to go through as gasless through the correct smart account, because it's how it's set up in the application. But then the UI of the wallet model is going to look different. It's going to look as a regular wallet. But for example, I mentioned that this one comes basically ready out of the box. We just added a chain, and then I wanted to show how to add passkey. And these are really simple edit on this in this file. Let me just find my reference here from the documentation. So essentially, to enable the passkey authentication here, from this package, from Particle Network Connected EVM, we import passkey smart wallet. So we just import it here, and then down in the configuration where we can add the connectors down here. In wallet connectors will be inside EVM wallet connector. Inside this object, we can add connectors, functions, and passkey smart wallet that we imported earlier. And that's it. This is essentially all you need to include passkey in your application. And then, for example, what else can we show? We could show, let's say that you want to limit what kind of social logins you have. You can, if we, let me see. If we add auth types inside the auth wallet connector object, so inside here, we can add auth types with this kind of array, with these syntaxes, and you can then decide which auth types you have. So for example, in this case, let's say I remove the email, then those are the 4 social logins that are going to be available to us, plus the Web3 connection ones and the passkey. So this is how you configure basically a connect kit. This object is going to be imported. So essentially here we export particle connect kit, and then within your application, in this case allow.tsx since it's Next.js, but then we import that particle connect kit from the connect kit file that we have there, and we wrap the application with it, just like this. And this comes already set up from the CLI, so no need for going over this actually from the CLI. But then you can use connect kit to configure connect how you want. And then we can go over the application itself. So this is how basically the application that comes from the CLI looks like, very basic. So if I save this one here, for example, you'll see that we just have a connect button and a few links. So let's go see how this looks. So this essentially is how the application that comes from the CLI looks like. It seems like this is not really the most up-to-date version. They didn't push it yet. We made some edits to this one that will give a little bit more features, but let me disconnect from this one. So this is essentially how it's going to look like whenever you create it from the CLI. If we connect, click connect, as you can see, only the 4 social logins options that we selected show up. There are the Web3 options, and then passkey. So for example, if I do create with passkey, I can use my touch ID here to create this wallet. And now here we go. I have a smart wallet based on Biconomy through passkey, and I didn't need to use anything else. And passkey is also synchronized across your Apple and Android devices. So it's a very convenient method to use. So let's go over the application itself and see how to add some features. So the first thing that we want to do here is, well, if we want, we can just delete this UI here because we're going to use a different UI. So the application that we have in this demo is about 300 lines of code. Half of it is the UI. So what I'm going to do is kind of guide you through how the imports work, how the key parts of the code works, but then I'm going to skip a lot of the UI. I'll just copy paste directly so we can be a little bit more efficient. But essentially the first thing that we want to do here is that we want to use the use client statement because we're going to use effects for some states. So we need to use this one here. So for including these features that we saw in the first demo, we'll start importing the particle packages essentially. So we do from particle network connect kit, we want to import some hooks. So the first one is going to be the connect button. And this is really just the only hook that you need to manage the connect button with the widget and disconnect everything from there. Then we'll import use account. This basically gives access to functions to manage the account. Then we import use public client. This is basically how we interact with the chains and the RPCs, essentially to fetch data from chains. Use particle auth because we want to fetch data from the user. For example, we had the name, we had the avatar and stuff like that. We use particle auth for that. Then we import use smart account because we want to use the account abstraction features. And then use modal. This one is just giving functions to basically interact with the model. For example, when I click the button in the middle of the UI to open the wallet model, this is where it comes from. And then other packages that we need will be the EIP 1193 providers that we, in this case, we use ethers. So the second part of imports that we do will be the account abstraction packages, or rather functions, AA wrap provider, and send transactions, send transaction mode we need. So those are the two functions that we're gonna use for the account abstraction features. And as you can see, they come directly from ConnectKit. Then we import ethers down here. So we need ethers, and we also need to import the type. In this case is this one here. We need to import the type EIP 1193 provided to avoid some type errors since we're using TypeScript here. And then ConnectKit uses VM in the background to interact with the chains. So I'm going to import a couple of utility functions from VM as well. There will be format ethers. I can't write. Format ether and parse ether from VM. You could use the same functions that come from ethers. I like to use the one from VM, and then it's also a good chance to show that you can do that. So those are really all the imports that we need to include all these features into your application. Now for this next part about the application itself, I'll maybe speed it up a little bit, and I'll do less writing and a little bit more copy pasting of the things that we need, so we keep it a little bit more efficient. But the first thing that we want to do is basically set up the functions from the various hooks that we imported. In this case are going to be all those functions from these 4 hooks. So the use account hook essentially allows you to interact with the account itself. So as you can see here is where we can fetch, for example, whether the user is connected or disconnected, the chain ID of the chain that we're using, the current status, so if it is connecting or not, and then the chain object. The chain object is basically an object showing you the details of the chain that is currently selected within the account. There are various ways to select the account, or rather the chain, as we saw earlier. From particle auth, we said we wanted to use it to get user information, so we use the get user info function, and then we have use public client, where we basically instantiate a public client, and this is just a way to interact with the blockchain itself. For example, when we want to fetch a balance, um, we have to either create a public client from this function here using what's already available through Particle Connect, in this case VM, or we could do it through ethers as well. In this case, we are just using, let me see what we're using the public client in this case. So it's a good way to show how to actually use what's already available within Particle Connect. And then the smart account. Um, the smart account here is important because we want to use the account abstraction features. So if we don't instantiate the smart account and we don't use it, if we don't use this one here within the interaction, so sending transactions, then the transaction is essentially going to be sent from the regular wallet, not from the smart account. So the account abstraction features will not be available. So we have to make sure that we instantiate it here and then also show you how we're going to use it later. The next step that I have here is just creating some states. Don't know, actually I didn't import this React stuff and the states. So I import them up there. Those states are pretty self-explanatory. Those are just to manage some of the UI things, so I'm not going to cover those too much. Another more UI related thing that we have here is the connection statuses. So that's how we use those three status functions that we import from use account. We just kind of create this object to basically understand in what state we are, and this is what basically manages that UI part that was showing. Is the user connected, is not connected, it is connecting. So this is just how to showcase how to use basically those components here. Not really necessary to do, but it's a nice UX feature, and I like to show how to use it. And then we are going to use one of those, actually I believe is connecting. It's also used within the connection logic, but we'll go over that later. Now, one of the important things that we want to really take from this workshop is how to use the smart account within Particle Connect. And essentially, we have two ways. This function that I imported now, rather this object that I imported now, this is how we basically set up the smart account to be used with the ethers provider. Because we said it comes built in from Particle Connect, the smart account functionalities and everything, but we can either use it that way or we can use it through ethers or another EIP 11 provider. So that's why I include this. So essentially what we do here is that we create a new ether provider with ethers.browser providers in this case. And then in that provider, we create this AA wrap provider. And essentially that is then the ultimate smart account provider that is going to actually interact with the chains. And this object takes in the smart account that we created earlier from use smart account. That's why I was like, it's important that we create this and then we use it. So now anytime that we use this custom provider object from ethers, it's underlying going to use the signer from the smart account. So whenever we use this custom provider, we know that is the smart account having that interaction. And then the second parameter that it takes is the transaction mode. So with the smart account and the account abstraction features, we can select whether the transaction is gasless, so sponsored by our application. In this case, it's selected as gasless. But then we have other options. We also have user pay native, meaning that the user pays for it, or use select. So the user select is the user is allowed to choose which method they want to use. In this case, I'm going to use gasless so we can show the full features there. Then the next couple of functions that I have here are more utilities than anything else. But the fetch balance function here, for example, we said that we can fetch data from the chain. In this case, I use the fetch balance because I wanted to include some UI for it. In the demo there, we had the balance. So this is how we can fetch it, essentially. Is this function that uses the public client to call get balance on the address. Now, the address, where are we taking the address from? I might have missed something. Oh no, never mind. I created this function earlier than my train of thought is that the address is passed to the function and we're gonna take it from the smart account. Anyway, essentially this function takes an address that we're gonna later take on from the smart account, and it uses public client to fetch the balance on it. If you remember, public client is imported from the use public client hook. And in this case, we are basically using the infrastructure the particle connect kit includes with it. So this public client is basically an instance of VM provider that is using the RPC from the chain that is selected. And that's how we are essentially able to call get balance. You can use the same principle to call other regular RPC calls if you need, I don't know, nonces, blocks, and things like that. And then the rest of the logic in this function is really just for the UI, is that if we have a balanced response, then we basically parse it from the way format that it comes with, we parse it into ether, and then we set the balance state here. One thing that I wanted to show is that when you use VM for fetching this kind of information, the result of this, in case balance response, is going to be a number in big number like this, something with the N notation. So it's a big number. One thing to notice is that when the balance of the address is 0, it's going to return this, but basically this condition is going to basically read it as null or undefined. That's why I have this else that actually sets the balance to 0 in case this is undefined. Doesn't mean that it didn't receive a response. It means that it's 0 and it can't understand that it's 0. There's probably better ways to do it. It's just a simple way to showcase it. But then how we fetch this function is going to be in the next section. So the next section is a use effect that we used to do a few different things. And in this case, the use effect is called every time the user is actually connected. So when the is connected object returns true, means the user is connected. So this is when this use effect is called, when a smart account is created, when the user info is fetched, or when the chain ID changes. So this is just so whenever one of these changes, and the chain ID is kind of the more important one here. Whenever the user selects a different chain, then we refetch this information so that everything is up to date. So in this case, the first thing that we do is that we check if the user is connected and there is a smart account. If a smart account exists, then we can simply use await smart account or get address to extract the address of the smart account. And that's it. Here's how we fetch the address, and then we can use the address to call the balance. In this case, I also use an inset user address, and that's simply the address that you see displayed in the UI. And then we can also check that if the user is connected, we can call the get user info object and get the information from the users. So basically, this get user info returns this info object, user info object, and then that user info object has a wealth of information about the user, email, avatar, and all sorts of things. Maybe once I'm done going over this, I'll link the page in the documentation where you can see all the information available. But in this demo, we're going to see a few of the things available in this object here. Then the other couple of functions that I wanted to go over before the important stuff are those here. So in this case, we set up custom button to open the model, and this is just to showcase how you can do it in your application. We use the use modal hook, is open and set open, and then we have this function that is going to be called when you click the button, and it just sets open to true, and it opens the modal. Very simple. The on-ramp, so Particle has an on-ramp feature that you can use in this way. You essentially can create a URL that is gonna basically open the on-ramp page with the features that you want to. Also, we can also link a page in the docs to go over this. Not super high priority to spend too much time on it in this workshop. Now the bulk of this application is sending transactions. So far we saw how to instantiate providers and the smart account here and here, how to use the public client to get public data from the blockchain, how to get user info. And now we can see how to actually send transactions. So we said we have basically two ways to send transactions, either through Particle natively. In this case, we do both, so we can showcase this. So now this next function that we have is essentially using the smart account directly to send a user operation, so an account abstraction related function. So what we do here is relatively straightforward. We create the transaction object, and this is just a simple to an address. This recipient address is picked up from the UI. Data is set on 0 right now. Not really necessary for this specific transaction, but I like to add it there just to show how you would add the data in there. And then to use basically the smart account features natively, you have to build the user operation yourself. So we essentially use the get fee quotes function from the smart account. This one is going to return a few things that we can use. So fee quote result can return user op and user op hash that are fetched from verifying paymaster gasless. And then we basically take those two and we pass them through the send user operation. And that's it. This is how you will basically build a user operation and send it natively through the Particle provider here. We can link documentation on these specific things too. And then in this case, the application really just gives a simple alert, say, hey, your transaction was sent, here's the hash. So essentially the smart account does send your user operation returns the transaction hash once it's confirmed or once it's sent. So this is really all you need to send transactions. What is this? 12, 15 lines of code. If we want to use the provider, EIP 1193 provider to send a transaction, is actually even simpler. Because in this case, natively here, we kind of have to manually manage and create the user operation, fetching, user op, a user op hash, and all these things. Through the EIP 1193 provider ethers, is even simpler. As you can see, it's much shorter, and it's really just one line of code here to send a transaction. This is a feature that we like to highlight quite a bit, the functionality and the option to use 1193 providers, because it's all good and dandy if you create a new application, you can start,